Okay, so welcome to the week 6 workshop for Crim 1001 Foundations of Criminology. This is a make-up workshop because we had the Easter public holiday. I was just checking in with the group to see how everyone's going, and the general consensus is that we're all feeling a little bit slack and lacking in motivation after the break. And I just explained to the group that that is completely normal. It's typical. It's what we see. People often take the break as a break. And if you haven't worked through the break and worked on your uni stuff, then this is a really good chance to use that as motivation to get back into it. I did also say that if anyone is really struggling at this point, please reach out to me. Happy to discuss. But there's also the Academic Learning Centre. So remember Dr. Cody and the ALC, and also counselling if you need it, and of course student services. So it's a good point just to reflect and see where you're at. And if you're really feeling like you're struggling with the adjustment to uni life, then please reach out. I can't stress that enough. The support is there, but we don't know if you're struggling unless you tell us. So please do let us know. All right, so let's get back into it. Here we are. This is to those that turned up or to those that are listening, at least you're here and you're committed and you're ready to get back into it. So let's do that. We are going to start with the assignment that's coming up. So yes, the topic for this week is white collar crime, but we are going to park that until the end. So your case study analysis. Hopefully you've started at least to choose your offender profile. If you haven't, this is your moment to do that. So there are 3 offender profiles that you can choose from. They are there on the screen. John Deviant, Jane Criminal, Michael Vigilante. So have a look through those. They are up on Moodle. I'm going to open them up in just a moment so we can have a look together. Of course, when we had Dr. Cody in week 4, he talked about the assignment. He also provided the 2 examples that I had put together, the bad example and the good example. I'm also going to pull those up in a moment and just go through those and any questions that you might have. So you have to apply 2 theories to your chosen offender profile. Those 2 theories obviously have to be applicable. So we're going to look at what it means to apply them, but the relevancy of the theories or the appropriateness of the theories is also very important. Some people have emailed me with their theories just to check, and thus far everyone has been spot on. The question then is obviously the quality of how you apply them to the case study, but at least getting the theories right is the first step. So we can talk a little bit about that today, and you can email me if you'd like. As I might have mentioned, maybe not, it's due on the 9th of May, so we are the 23rd today. So you have all of next week and a little bit of the week after, so essentially about a fortnight to get this done, which is doable. So if you haven't started now, you can most certainly make a start today and do very well on the assignment. Okay, so if anyone has started the assignment, pop it into the chat. If you haven't started the assignment and you have questions about the assignment, also pop those in the chat. I'm going to keep talking, and as I'm talking, hopefully I will answer your questions. So here we have the breakdown of the assignment, the quiz that you did, which everyone did pretty well on, by the way. Congratulations on that. There are a few questions that, yes, did trip people up a little bit, but most of you did really well. Quiz was 15%. So you can tick 15 marks and whatever you obviously got out of 15 off the tab. And then you've got the case study that's 35%, this one. And so 35 marks, essentially, up for grabs. And then your reflection is worth 50%. Now, I will also talk quickly about the reflection because I don't want you to forget it. And it is worth half the mark. So we do need to really focus on that once we get this case study done. So case study 35%. Let me share my screen. And firstly, I'll bring up the offender profiles. So bear with me. Actually, I might just let me share the document. Let me see if I can find that instead. Sharing my screen might be a little bit better. No, it won't. Okay, that's all right. I will share my screen with you. Okie dokie. So First of all, actually, if you don't know where to find the assignment information, if we go back here, if we go into foundations, hopefully you can all see my screen. Scrolling down to assessment, and it opens up this screen. This is the document that contains all of the assessment information. So if we open that up, you'll see the 3 of them in there. So you've obviously done the quiz, tick that off. And here we are, offender case study analysis. 1,500 words, 35% of final grade, due on the 9th of May. You choose one profile, you apply 2 theories to that profile. These are the things that your analysis has to include. So an overview of each of the 2 chosen theories, why you've chosen them for that case, an explanation of the factors that are relevant to the individual case that you've chosen and the behaviour and the crimes that we're seeing in the pathway, how the factors may have led to the offending behaviour. And so what you're doing there, this is the applying part. You're applying the relevant concepts that come from that theory. So it's not just about this theory deals with peer relationships, and therefore because this person had bad peer relationships, they are an offender. When we start to look at theories in more detail, they have their own terminology, they have their own concepts that have a name, processes that have a name, processes that might follow steps. They have their own definitions. So that's what I'm looking for, is that you really truly understand the finer details of each of the 2 theories that you've chosen. And then at the very end, a brief overview. So this should not take up as much space as the second dot point, but an overview of how crim theories can assist us in understanding offending and determining appropriate responses, as well as their limitations. You can do that kind of bookended. So you can have a little bit of that in the introduction. You can sort of put a little bit of it through, thread a little bit of it throughout your analysis if you like. So you might say something like, what we can see here is that social learning theory explains this aspect of offending. However, it is limited in capturing this other element. So you can start to mention the limitations and constraints of the theories as you're applying them if you would like. Or you could just have a really nice paragraph at the end that talks about crim theories and what we've seen in your analysis and how they can help us and how they could help us to inform laws, practices, policies in relation, link it back to what we've seen in your essay. Referencing 5 different scholarly sources. By scholarly, we mean journal articles or book chapters, ideally found on the CQU database or something like Google Scholar, and a reference list at the very end on a new page with APA 7 format. Now I'm just going to see if I can pull up the chat. No draft dates. So the 9th of May is the final due date. I can't look at a draft, but if you access something like Studiosity or the ALC might be able to look at a draft for you. I can, however, check off the theories that you've chosen, so that would be fine. Okay. These are the criteria that you are assessed on. You'll see that the illustration of the relevant theories through considered analysis and applying them to the case is worth 14. Your understanding of the purpose of crim theory, so that last dot point there, is worth half of those marks, so 7. So again, when you're working out how much attention to pay to particular things, focus on the marks that they're worth. Like, it would be silly to focus majority of your essay on the purpose of crim theory when it's only worth 7, and then not illustrate the relevant theories well enough when they're worth 14 marks. Your application of those 5 sources, so being able to find them, the fact that they're scholarly, the fact that you put them throughout with the citations, author, surname, year throughout the text, that's what we're talking about here, but also that you've actually engaged with them. So you're actually saying, you know, research, oh, there's a cat about to come across the screen. Research shows, or research by Hale 2020 indicates that social learning theory does X, Y, Z, whatever it might be. So you've actually got to engage with the research as you apply it. And then the last point there is your quality of work. So things like your writing style, expression, spelling, grammar, has it been proofread? Is it clearly laid out, or is it sort of mishmash of paragraphs that are all different font sizes? Is the structure appropriate? And we'll look at that in a moment. Is the referencing correct? So you get 8 marks for that, or up to 8 marks for that. All right, I did see a question pop up. Yeah, that's right, Madison. So we don't include draft feedback unless that is part of the assessment process. So some assessments or some units, there might be, for example, an assessment where you submit a plan first and you get marked on the plan, you get the feedback, and then you do the assignment. Yeah, so generally unit coordinators can't look at a full draft of work and provide feedback. That's where you have to go to those other services. So Studiosity, ALC, they can usually help you with that. But for us, we can only guide you on points of, say, the content accuracy. So you would have to come to me and say, hey, Rachel, I've chosen this theory. This is how I'm applying it because I think it fits John's profile in this way. Is that right? So we provide feedback on the content, but not on the actual full written piece of work. And then obviously that means that then what we're assessing you on at assessment time is, you know, what you have presented and what you've worked on to that point. So if you do feel like you need feedback on the draft in the sense of that last point, so that's where things like Studiosity and ALC will be able to help you. So we can't like mark up a draft before it's actually submitted, but they can give you help with those things for sure. Yeah, you're welcome, Madison. No worries at all. All right. So yeah, keep the questions coming if you have them. Very good questions. So that's the instructions on Moodle. If you go down here, here are the profiles under the case study analysis. Here is the Dropbox. So Dropbox is where you click in and you upload your Word document of your assignment by 11:59 p.m. at night. So that's important that you click submit for that. Otherwise, it will sit in draft form. So just check that. The other thing I'll mention too is that Dr. Cody talked about this, but the use of AI. So when you do click submit, it runs your assignment through Turnitin, and Turnitin basically matches the text that you have provided for other online text. So if you have copied and pasted from an article or a book chapter and you haven't actually written it in your own words, it will highlight it in color and it will give it a match for Turnitin. That then generates a Turnitin report, which is basically your entire assignment with any matching sections highlighted so that we can see how high the match is. So generally anything below 20%, there's a margin of error that we allow for. If matches are very small, for example, if you all included the unit title, the code, the names of the case studies, for example, they will match because it also matches them with other student papers that have been submitted. So what you'll find is that certain parts of your assignment will match, but those matches are insignificant. So we filter those out. So you're not going to be reprimanded or punished, say, if you have a template and that matched, because of course it's going to match. It's where you have copied big chunks or continuous strings of a sentence that have come from somewhere else. It tells us, A, that it has matched, and it shows us where it has come from. So it will show that it's come from, say, you know, those sites where you pay people to produce essays or where you can, you know, access essays online. It will show us that. It will show us if it's come from another student paper. So that's something to be aware of. If you are concerned about that, the first thing is to understand how to paraphrase. And that means to write what you have read in your own words. Dr. Cody went over that, and ALC can also help you with that. Okay. The other thing that it will tell me is the AI match. Now, we have come a long way in this software, so we are pretty confident now, rather than the early days where it was a bit uncertain. But now we know that when it matches, it is truly a reflection that AI has written your work, including that if you use things like Grammarly, and if they rewrite the text for you, that is AI. And as Dr. Cody said, it will capture that as AI. So I can't stress enough, please don't use AI to actually write the assignment. Write it in your own words. You can use AI to give you hints about the theories that might match the case, some points that you might raise about theories, where you might find resources, what references you could use. But when it comes to actually sitting down and typing up the assignment, you must type it up yourself because it will match for AI. If it matches for AI, the issue then is that I have to start to ask questions about your use of AI. You have to try to prove that you didn't use AI, and it can constitute academic misconduct, as can plagiarism. Usually the approach in first year, first term, if you don't have any previous cases of academic misconduct or plagiarism, is that I will have a conversation with you first to get a sense of, why that might have happened. So don't worry, it's not like you just get kicked out of uni straight away. It doesn't happen like that. But the best way is to try to avoid it if you can. And then if it does happen to happen, we'll have a conversation about that. So does anyone have any questions about that? Because I know it can be a little bit scary in terms of, your first piece of work. But just know that as long as you are trying to do the right thing, if there was a reason why it came up, maybe you didn't understand how to paraphrase, we can have that discussion, and I can try to understand your situation a bit better. I'm not just going to report you straight away for that either. So yeah, no questions about that have come up, I don't think. All right, let's go to the offender profiles. Let's open those up. Here's the first one here. So John Deviant, what we're going to do is we're just going to go through each of them, and then I can try and track the chat, but it would be easier if people turn on their mic. Let's have a look through this and just see what kind of comes up for you, what you think could apply. So childhood and upbringing, I'll do like the cliff notes. So we've got John grew up in a low-income neighbourhood. There's high crime rates there. His father was absent. He was incarcerated. His mother struggled with substance abuse. John experienced neglect and witnessed domestic violence from a very young age, often left at home alone to fend for himself, limited access to education, and no positive role models in his life. He was lonely and depressed as a child. Then he, in his teens, at 14, started skipping school, hanging out with older boys who were naughty. They were engaging in crime. He was caught shoplifting with them, arrested, but it didn't end up going anywhere. Then at 15, he joined a local gang. He was looking for a sense of belonging and protection that he didn't get at home. The gang leader, who was sort of like a father figure to him, introduced him to drug dealing. His first major crime was that he participated in a burglary at a local convenience store with that gang. He found it thrilling. There was a major financial reward from that, and that reinforced his criminal behavior. As a result, he was then promoted to a higher role in the gang. So the nature of his offending was primarily driven by economic necessity. So he felt that he had to do it to get money, and the influence of the other boys. He committed crimes to support himself financially, and he also wanted status within the gang. So the offences that he committed included burglary, drug trafficking, violent assaults. At 17, he was involved in a violent altercation. So we can see there his offending is escalating with a rival gang member, which resulted in serious injuries. This incident marked his transition to more violent crimes. Just for the group here, what are the key things that you think stand out for John that you would be analysing? Okay, so social learning theory, differential association. So there's obviously something going on there with the peers. Yes, definitely. Strain theory. What does the strain theory relate to? Someone tell me. I'm just going to leave that open there. Hopefully it can disappear. So yes, I would say that if you're looking at any of those social theories around peer associations, you've got that right. Strain theory, I think you've got right as well. Yeah, money, education, family, strain. Yeah, absolutely. So there's more the circumstances, the economic circumstances, rather than the peer aspect there. Good. All right. I think obviously the familial situation with the father and the mother is really pertinent. And then obviously the influence of the other boys is really important too. Good work. All right, let's look at offender profile 2. Jane, middle class family, both parents present, so different to above. But she experienced emotional and sexual abuse from her father, who had a history of mental illness. Jane struggled with low self-esteem and depression throughout childhood. Despite her potential in an academic sense, she did have difficulty forming healthy relationships and often felt isolated. Her pathway into offending began in late teens. She started using drugs to cope with the emotional pain that she had felt from her prior victimization. At 18, then she was introduced to drugs, heroin, by a boyfriend who was an addict, so harder drugs. Her addiction quickly escalated, leading her to engage in criminal activities to fund her drug habit. Jane dumped her boyfriend after he was repeatedly violent towards her. However, then she had no money. She became homeless. She began working as a prostitute to make money for drugs. Her criminal activities then expanded to include theft and burglary, often targeting people that she perceived as vulnerable, such as elderly individuals. Her offences were primarily driven by her addiction, her drug addiction, and the need to escape her traumatic experiences. So she committed crimes like shoplifting, burglary, drug possession. Her criminal behaviour was sporadic, so it came, peaks and lulls, often very impulsive, reflecting an unstable mental state. For instance, during a desperate period, she was suffering a mental health crisis and broke into a pharmacy to steal prescription drugs, and she was arrested, short stint in jail for that, no support upon release, and repeatedly then incarcerated for minor offences for many years. What are we thinking are the important elements for Jane that stand out? So we've got self-medication. We've got strain theory and social bonds. So there's a lot going on there. So with the self-medication, so yes, we have prior victimization. We have then her self-medicating. What could we potentially match to that? Any ideas? I think, yes, strain theory with the financial struggles most certainly could apply. Social, like a labeling theory. Yeah, with the labeling, Marianne, one thing I would just say is that from the information that you have here, you would have to show how she was labeled. So because labeling is that process that occurs where there are symbols sort of that label, you would have to, from this information, show how that happened. Now, one important thing with this is the information has to be there in the offender profile. So make sure that you're not assuming that things have happened. That's all that I would say for that. But if you can show that from what's here, social learning and her introduction to hard drugs. Yes, there is an element there with the boyfriend and the drug use where the drug use itself may have been learned socially, but the question is her offending. So remember that you're explaining her offending behavior. So was her offending behavior learned? Was it in the context of a peer group? If not, then that might not be the best link. Positivism, in what way? So we've got biological and psychological positivism. How would you could have a think about what type of positivism you would apply. But remember, positivism is very broad, and even psychological positivism even broader. So if you're going to choose that, then I would like to see of psychological positivism, because there are elements of mental health challenges here. What specific area or theory? That's when you need to look at specific literature, okay? Because there's stuff around trauma that's going on. So you could find a theoretical angle around trauma. There is a big, big one that nobody has mentioned yet. I'm going to give you a moment to think about it. We have gendered violence, father to Jane here. We have gendered violence, boyfriend to Jane. We then have prostitution. Are these profiles on Moodle? Yeah. That's where I opened it from, yeah. Nope. What theory that we looked at in the week on critical criminology deals with gender? I'll just wait a little bit longer. Yes, Marianne, thank you. Feminist criminology. Feminist theory is highly applicable here. I'll just tell you that, okay? It is going to explain the gendered nature of her victimization and how that led her to a gendered form of deviant behavior, okay, which then ties into her offences. So I would encourage you, if you choose this one, to look at feminist theory to understand how Jane's offending is different to, say, the experience of John or Michael, because she is female or because she is woman, okay? Because it's drug use for trauma, which again comes under feminist theory, gendered violence leading to trauma, etc. So I think, yeah, there's some good ideas here. It seems like this one's not as clear cut as the others. I would say don't not choose it for that reason. It's got quite a lot to work with in there. But definitely strain, the homelessness, the money, but I would also think feminist theory would be a really good one for that. And if you would like to focus on mental health, then definitely psychological positivism, but you would need to be very specific then in looking at how that led to her offending. All right, let's look at Michael, the last one. Rural area. Michael was raised in a rural area, limited access to resources and opportunities. Parents were hard working but struggled to make ends meet. He excelled academically. He was very intelligent, but he was bullied and socially excluded due to his low socioeconomic status. He developed a strong sense of resentment towards authority figures and people who had money. So Michael's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He began a little bit later than the others, in his early 20s. He joined a radical political group and met other like-minded individuals who shared the same views. The group advocated for violent resistance against perceived social injustices. So they're angry at the wealthy. They meet up online. They discuss in detail the methods and tactics that they're going to use to dismantle the government. And he becomes deeply involved in planning and executing acts of vandalism and sabotage against government and corporate entities. A significant event happens when his family lose their farm due to a bank foreclosure. It fuels his anger and solidifies his belief that the system is rigged against people like him. He participated in protests, and that eventually escalates to more extreme actions. He set fire to a government building, and he sends threats of harm to members of parliament. His activities are ideologically motivated. So they are motivated by these beliefs, these political beliefs that he holds. He believes that his actions are justified. They aim to challenge and disrupt oppressive systems. His offences are arson, property destruction, and cyber attacks. Okay, so we've got some strain in there. Yeah, I think there could be strain definitely with the financial situation. Yeah, with differential theory, I think there's another theory that you are referring to that has a different name. It starts with C. It is similar, it comes from the work of Marx. Does anyone know what it is? Starts with C. Conflict. So when, that week on critical criminology, when we started to look at Marxist criminology, conflict theories of crime, that difference between rich versus poor. Okay, so we have that. Is he learning from other people in the same way? So John's part of a group. Michael is part of a group as well. They are discussing the methods around crime. So what else could you match to that potentially? They're meeting up to talk about, how they would, and the tactics that they would use. So what would be a good match for that? Learning theory, yep, differential association. So remember, differential association as a form of social learning has those stages. It has those aspects around people learn the methods, they learn the definitions favorable to crime. Yeah, I definitely think differential association has something here. Yeah, I guess weighing up the cost and benefit. But do you think he is weighing up the benefit in that sense, Holly? So if we say, so what you would have to show then is that rational choice theory, cost benefit analysis, that he is actually weighing that up. So if you see that here, that he's doing that, I mean, it's that one's a little bit of a stretch when I look at it, because I think, is he really weighing up the cost and benefit? That might be more so if we were looking at a white collar form of crime where there is a great financial benefit to be gained. I would say that this kind of behavior is somewhat irrational, because he's not going to benefit greatly from the acts that he's engaging in. And he also is highly likely to be caught. So remember that thing about deterrence with rational choice. Yeah, there's definitely social. So I think definitely social elements there, social learning theory, differential association, and there's also strain with his family. But conflict theory as well. So I think what I notice a lot with students when they go to apply theories is they apply theories that are very much individual level focused. So it's very easy to apply theories like social learning or strain. However, the broader theories, which actually are really great at capturing the broader context of this, like the political or gendered context, such as feminist theory with Jane or conflict related theories or critical theories with Michael, students tend to shy away from them because they're a little bit more complex. Yes, cultural, definitely. But again, because cultural criminology is a broad umbrella, what I would say, if you're choosing something from that cultural area, then most certainly make sure that you're choosing like literature that's very specific about how that's happening here. So the more specific you can be, the better. All right, we might leave that there. I think that's enough tips and hints. Hopefully that was helpful. I am going to show you the good and the bad example now. Okay. Just to give you an idea, this is in Dr. Cody's video, so I'm not going to go over it in great detail, but I just want to show you. Oops. Okay. Good example. Heading. Okay, you will also have a cover page, which is just your name, the unit code, the unit title, the assignment, the word number of words, the word count, etc. So follow the APA format for that. As I said, Psych has an outline of that. Introduction, you can title it or not title it, I don't mind. It is very clear. This case study examines, and you're telling me who. You're telling me a little bit about them, and you're telling me to understand his behavior. These are the two theories that are applied. So that's what I want from your introduction. It has to be clear. It has to be direct. It doesn't waffle. It doesn't start to get into unpacking the literature in any way. Overview of the offending. It will be up on Moodle. I will pop it up in a moment. Overview of the offending. So this is 2 paragraphs, very short. I don't want heaps, okay? In your own words, what happened. And as we just did then, the cliff notes. So the key things that you take away from it. Oh, Samantha's got your hand up. Yep. Samantha?
Oh no, that's just going back to the other bits, the theories.
Yep.
Only 2?
Yep. Only
2 theories. We can't flesh it out with 3 or 4.
No. And
only 2 which we deem most applicable.
That's correct. Yeah. And the reason for that is it is when you start to unpack the two in the word count, it doesn't give you a lot of space. So I want to see those two done really well.
Okay, that's right. Good.
Yeah. The issue is that the other year, students they could choose like theory 3 or 4 that were kind of supplementing theory 1 and 2. And then what they did, and this led to a poor essay outcome, and that's why I've changed it, is that they didn't cover any of them in any great detail because there wasn't enough words, which didn't show understanding. Yeah. So really pick two and go like right into the finer details of like the key concepts, the terminology, the processes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And happy to if you want to, as I said before, send me, this is who I've chosen. These are the two theories that I've chosen. These are the ways that I think that they're applicable. And this is what I'm going to discuss. I'm happy to have a look at that. Just, in an email would be fine. Just to make sure you've got it right. All right. So, intro, overview, very brief. Application of theory 1, tell me which one you have applied. Now, this kind of relates to that point, Samantha, about, the two theories and the level of detail. What we see here with this good example is that there's a depth with like at least application of theory 1. Theory 2 is a bit shorter because I just cut that off. But look at this part here, okay? It's not just a surface level explanation. You're talking about when the theory was developed. According to the theory, then you start to explain his behavior. You're using the literature to back that up. So I will put this up, have a read through. Obviously, it's a completely fake example, but it gives you a sense of the depth that you do need to go into. And then again, you do the same thing with theory 2 that you've chosen, and it's really unpacking the person's behavior. Okay, and then you will have conclusion. So this is where you can pop in that contribution of crime theory, or as I said, you can sort of put it through here, thread it through. It has to just be a sentence or two here or there. The bad example, which Dr. Cody did go through, it's dot point. That's how AI will spit it out to you. And I know that because it does it when I create the case studies. There's more than 2. They're very, very brief. It's not formatted. There's bold font. There's the crim lecture is referenced. So he went over all of that. I won't go back over it, but go back to week 4, look at Dr. Cody's breakdown of the bad example. So we don't want it to look like that. We want it to look a bit more like this. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. Any questions at all? I will pop that file in the chat here, and I'll also pop it online, and I'll give you a moment to think if you have any other questions. That's okay. I'm sure they will come to you. And remember that you can email me anytime with questions. Oh, where have I put this good example, bad example? Just had it open, so it must be somewhere. There we go. What document are you talking about? The good example, bad example, Marianne? No, so that's a document that I put together and I gave that to Dr. Cody. He referred to it in his ALC presentation in week 4. But I am about to pop it up on Moodle. it won't, the content of it will not be relevant in any way. It's just for you to get a taste for how to set out your assignment. So I will do that. Have a think. Any other questions? If you'd like to have a little bit of a break, you can have one now while I'm doing this, and then we'll come back. Right. And for those at home, I am putting it under the assessment case study analysis section. I will pop it above the Dropbox. So let me do that now. And I'll get someone to go in and tell me that they can see it. So just give me a second. Right. Oh, the joys of Moodle. It's disappeared. Oh, there it is. I'm just moving to the right place, and then I'll get someone to pop in and tell me that it's there. So it should be underneath the offender profiles on Moodle if someone wants to go in. Yes, Larissa, I will go through the reflective assignment. We'll just get over this one first for sure. We will talk about that. So are you talking about the video from Dr. Cody is up as well. He posted it in Teams, and it is I have put it in the week 4 workshop. So there's part 1 and part 2 under week 4. And that's where he showed my examples and talked to them. So the week 4 workshop is what you want to look at in addition to what we just did then. Yeah. All right. Let's get the PowerPoints back. Any other questions? How are we feeling about the assignment? Do you feel at least a little bit more confident now that you know some of the theories? I mean, you have all the information there. We've given you as much information as we are legally permitted to without actually doing the assignment. I think that you all are very, very capable. I think sometimes students doubt themselves, and particularly if you're new to university, but just give it your best shot, and ask questions or email me. Yeah, you will, if you put in the effort, you will do a pretty good job. Good, Rachel. You're with a positivity today, Rachel, feeling a bit more confident. That's good. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Samantha. Yeah, so those examples are up there. Good. Anything else that you need is available. So, if you don't know how to reference properly, there's the APA 7 referencing guide. If you need help with your writing, the ALC support is there. Studiosity, you log in with your CQ login. It is free, online, all hours of the night. They'll look at your stuff. But just remember, with things like Grammarly, don't get the program to rewrite for you. Okay. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Just checking there's nothing that you shouldn't be able to see on that. No, good. Can you imagine if I uploaded the answers? That'd be terrible. Not for you. Terrible for me. Okay, so with a draft through Turnitin, and maybe is Taylor still here? Taylor might be able to, because Taylor, you've done a few units. I don't know if you can usually see an example of your paper when you put it in draft form through Turnitin. Yes, you should be able to run it through Turnitin and see the score and then change it. Yes, but it looks at plagiarism only. So Larissa, if you want a draft, reviewed, you have to contact the Academic Learning Centre for help with your safe, but you need to go there with like a specific request. So for example, here's my draft. I would like some feedback on my grammar or my spelling or my formatting. But if with Turnitin's the plagiarism and AI detection software. So it's only going to tell you how much matches with something else. It's not actually going to tell you the quality of your work. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So if you want help with your assignment writing, it's ALC or Studiosity, which is an online, it's like a service that's online, it's free through your uni login. It's not run by CQU, it's an external service. Yeah, so you get access to that free with because you're a CQU student. Yeah. Any other questions? Now, Larissa, I think you asked earlier about the reflective piece. I just wanted to touch on it briefly now. It's not due until June 6th, but just to keep in mind that after the case study, you do have to choose one of the following prompts and write about them in a reflective piece that's worth 50%. So this is going to capture your thinking throughout the unit. Each prompt is slightly different in focus. So all I want you to do at this point in time, whilst you're obviously still focused on your critical analysis piece, is just read them. Okay, so I just want you to look at them to get a feel for them. And then after we've done the critical analysis piece, we'll start to talk about some of your ideas for these. Okay, so prompt 1. During this unit, you explored various perspectives on crime. That's what we're doing now. How has your thinking about, that should be crime, how has your thinking about crime evolved over the course of the term? Discuss using examples and concepts from the unit. Prompt 2. During this unit, you explored various perspectives on justice and punishment. So each prompt has a different conceptual focus or a different content-related focus. Justice and punishment. How has your thinking about the criminal justice system evolved over the course of the unit? So when we get to Module 7, Module 8, policing, Module 9, the courts, Module 10, corrections, that's more so what this prompt's relating to. Whereas prompt 1 is about the first 5 to 6 weeks of the course. Okay. How's your thinking about the criminal justice system evolved? Prompt 3. During the unit, you explore the role of criminology and the work of criminologists. How has this unit shaped your perception of the field and your future career pathway? So that's much broader, talking about, what criminology has to offer, what you've learned in terms of what criminologists do, both from a theoretical perspective, but also a practical perspective. Okay, so very different in the areas of focus, but it's, choose one that you really feel like you have enough to write on, where you have felt an impact in terms of the way you understand crime or the way you understand the criminal justice system or the way you understand criminology and criminologists. That's all I'll say for now, okay? I just want you to look at them. We'll talk about them after the assignment is due. Alrighty. Any other questions at all before we move on? Go back to the chat. I think that covered it. All right, remember, there are no silly questions. We are here to help, but I can't help you if I don't know that you need help. All right, I'll stop banging on about that. I think you've got the message loud and clear, hopefully. All right. Oh, extensions as well. That's another point. If you need an extension, please ask. And if you have a disability, whether it's physical or say an intellectual disability or mental health challenges, or if you're not sure if it qualifies for support, contact the Accessibility and Equity Unit and they can write you up a plan if you do qualify for that. So there's a form on the website that you submit. I'm also happy to discuss that with you. Samantha.
Yeah, hi. Can we go two, assessment two, the case study analysis, if we pick two of these goals, both have a strong leaning to, let's just say, strain theory.
Yeah. Well, I think you're
going to be similarities with what we say. Is that going to come out as plagiarism?
I think what you said was if you choose two that are both similar theories.
Yes. So say, for example, if it's a strain theory that applies to two of those,
no, one
is it going to, are they going?
One offender profile, two theories.
Yes. So what if let's say I pick differential theory for both profile 1 and profile 3, if they're applicable. Are they going to show up as being similar on Turnitin?
So is it going to match
we've already
another student's paper?
Well, yeah, or is profile 1 going to match with profile 3 in my own paper? Am I going to?
So you only discuss one profile in your paper. So you only discuss John, Jane, or Michael. And within that one individual's case, you choose two different theories. So it might be strain and social learning theory.
So one profile, two theories, not
right.
two profiles, two theories.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Yep.
Oh, I'm all over it then because I've done two. Okay.
Well, aren't you glad you came along today, Samantha? And trust me, there will be other people who have done that.
Well, I thought, yeah, that I had to pick two profiles and two theories for each of those profiles that would fit, but that's good.
Yep. Wow. One profile, two different theories. And yeah, you can't plagiarize yourself in the same paper. So say that would just be, I would just flag it as repetition. So anyway, to answer your question, because it still is relevant, say that you write something up the top and then you copy and paste that and you write it down the bottom. That would just be repetition within the paper. So I would flag it as you've already said this. However, you can plagiarize yourself across assignments. So just keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So you don't want to submit something for this that you've submitted for your psychology assignments or something. Yeah. So basically how Turnitin works is it holds that repository of all student papers that are put through Turnitin, and anything that exists out on the internet, it draws on that as well. So that's where it's gonna match to. No worries, Rachel. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for joining us. We will finish up soon. See you next week. Yeah, so good. Okay, I'm glad so one person. So you're either John, Jane, or Michael, and two theories. Now, as you were talking, Samantha, I actually thought you were going to ask a different question. And it was a very good question. So we'll just give it to you anyway. And the question is, should the theories be very different in nature? So, for example, if you chose two social learning types of theories, right, is that going to be a problem? Look, you're not going to be wrong. If you can apply them and you can apply them well, that's good. However, my advice would be to choose two theories that are quite different, because then you're explaining different parts of the offending. And that's why I talk about the individual level theories versus the more macro theories. So if you are, say, looking at strain theory, then say for number two, it might be really nice to go with a broader theory like feminist theory as well, because they're very different. So you're talking about very different elements of the case, very different pathways, related stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. You probably got a better chance of covering more if the theories are different. Otherwise, if they're too similar, they might actually just be almost under the same umbrella, and it might become a bit confusing which theory you're talking about. All right. I reckon you're going to do really well. You have to believe that you're going to do really well. And you also have to start it. So who's starting tonight? Yep, hands up. I'm sure there are a few people that will be commencing this assignment, hopefully today. All right, we have arrived at the content for this week. It is 11 o'clock, so we've got a little bit of time. We're going to do this quickly. So I am going to, how many? We've got 10 people. Let's just go with 2 groups. I want each group to find a real life case study of white collar crime. It could be something like corporate fraud, insider trading, embezzlement, tax evasion, okay? Then tell us what happened. What was the offense? Who perpetrated it? Tell us about the offender. Interested to know, or offenders. How many people were harmed? Is it easy to understand or interpret this crime event? Was it or is it easily detectable? And if not, why not? How could it be addressed or punished, and how could it be prevented? So I'm going to pop you into 2 even groups. I'm going to give you 15 minutes before I come back and check. You might like to have a scribe, someone that can, write your notes under these headings, okay? Also, you might like to just save these somewhere, or I can try and post them in the chat for you. All right, here we go. Breakout, so 11:15, I'll come and check how you're going. Oh, breakout rooms, there we go, 2 rooms. All right, don't forget to click join. All right, if you do have to leave, that's okay. We'll just see who we've got at the end. No worries at all. Here we go. All right, so I thought we would come back here because there were not many people left, and just see what we can find together, and just have a general chat about white collar crime. There's more than enough information on Moodle about it, but just to give you a sense of the key points to take away. So platypus payroll sounds interesting. Madison just said she found one called platypus payroll. Did you want to tell us about that? Oh, is it Plutus? Platypus sounds way better though. I'm going to Google it. Feel free to pop your information into the chat. Plutus payroll, yeah. That's okay, Madison. I was like, that sounds interesting. And then I was like, is it the shoe brand? Yeah, so let's have a look at that. I'll quickly pull that up. Let's use AI actually and see if we can get an overview. Okay, so it was a tax fraud conspiracy. Have I got the recording back on? Yep, I'm recording. Okay, good. So in September 2016, the AFP-led Serious Financial Crime Task Force commenced an investigation into an alleged conspiracy between several persons to dishonestly cause a loss to the Commonwealth, the tax fraud conspiracy. Evidence capable of proving the matter beyond a reasonable doubt was obtained by lawful telephone intercepts and surveillance video. The conspiracy involved the establishment and operation of a payroll services company, Plutus, and several apparently unrelated subcontracting companies, which were in truth controlled by several of the conspirators. The purpose of establishing this structure was to deprive the Commissioner of Taxation of pay-as-you-go withholding amounts and goods and services tax. So they wanted to basically dodge tax. They collected over 141 million in PG and GST that they were obliged to report to ATO, and at least 105 million was misappropriated because of the conspiracies. The ATO only ever got 30 million of that back. The conspirators agreed to launder the money, which should have been paid to the ATO. In furthering the money laundering conspiracy, various entities were used to receive, conceal, and divert the misappropriated taxes. So when we look at this type of crime, obviously what we see is it's happening in a different setting to street crime. Sorry, I got sidetracked looking at Samantha's comments on Bernie Madoff. Oh my gosh, yes, it's really, really interesting. So, with any of these that you look at, what do you notice is different about these types of crime compared to street-based crimes, say violent assaults that occur on the street? What's different about white-collar crimes in terms of the context, where they're occurring, their nature? Any thoughts? Okay, so really high amounts of money. Yep. So we're talking big dollars with these. Yep. They're all people that don't fit that profile of a criminal. Yeah, you're right, Samantha. All supposedly upstanding citizens that go to work, directors of companies. The range of people that it affects is broader. Yes, absolutely. So when you think about that, there's a high monetary value here, but there's also a lot of other people's lives that get impacted, whether they're ripping other people off, whether other people become involved and they're not aware. Yes, so white-collar crime actually affects far more people and harms far more people than any form of blue-collar crime, any sort of street-based offending, property-related offending of a lower level. Yep. It takes a lot to investigate. Good point, Taylor. It's when you read these cases, they're quite complex. Even for, a criminologist, even for someone like me, it takes a few goes reading through to connect who are the players, who are the people, how did it happen, the processes and strategies that they use. It's, different jargon, it's business speak, it's corporate, it takes a lot to understand. It takes a lot to investigate as well, because you have to be able to have that insider knowledge, like the phone tap and the intercepts and things like that. Absolutely. So we see that white-collar crime, whilst far more harmful, actually is more likely to go undetected than other forms of crime and unpunished compared to other forms of crime. Yeah, so Taylor says one white-collar case said it took over 1,800 interviews, 3,000 boxes of evidence, and 4 terabytes of digitized data. A lot of police resources and state or government resources that would go into this. So very likely that it will go undetected, but very likely that it will impact a lot of people. So when we're looking at white-collar crime, it's really important. Who thinks of white-collar crime when they first think of crime and criminology? And when you first got here, what are we going to study in criminology? Oh yeah, corporate crime by people that sit in offices in the high rises in the city. Most people don't think of that. They think of the Charles Mansons and the Ted Bundys, but in fact, they are like the 1%ers of the crime cohort, the offending cohort. So, that's really Cliff Notes about white-collar crime, is that it's different to other forms of crime. It's very difficult to understand. If it's very difficult to understand, do you think they're going to report about it extensively in the media or news? And why or why not? Do you think it's going to make the front page necessarily? So if you had a violent assault or a murder, and then you had some huge corporate crime, which one do you think is going to be reported? Taylor said, no, it takes up too much time to understand and write about. Yeah, so we have to keep in mind the media only have a specific amount of words and pages that they can use, and before people switch off as well. So people are not really interested. They're not going to read it for that long to understand. Yeah, and unless it affects an election, So unless another party could use it against the other party, if it did involve anyone from politics, which it can, because in that world, you know, people are often associated. But yeah, most of the time, no, it doesn't feed into that fear campaign, that fear mongering. Yeah, there's like big words that need to be used and explained to people that people might not understand. It's not accessible language as compared to, as Taylor said, woman stabbed. You know, or we hear like the most atrocious language about the deaths of women in the media lately, violence against women and reporting there. You know, and it captures people's attention, those really sort of gross, sensational headlines. Yeah, and unless you're affected, and you know, sorry to hear that, Samantha, you know, it affects people's livelihoods in very, very significant ways that have very severe mental health impacts too. You know, often people defrauded of big amounts of money, as you said, you know, then it has that flow-on effect. If that impacts their work, it impacts the money they're bringing in, it affects their family, it affects their mental health and well-being. Yeah. And then often without justice as well, the other point that you made, it's very difficult to convict people. Because if you've got a whole group of people or a corporation, who do you choose? Who's going to be thrown under the bus to take the hit? Did you want to add something, Samantha? I just saw your, yeah, go
Yeah,
for it.
yeah, well, they got justice. It cost them their business, their marriage, their relationships with children and other family members and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just terrible. And they got nothing out of it at the end, but they were just determined to have some resolution, but they didn't realize that it would destroy them all in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the time and cost that it would have taken. And, you know, when you look at then for individuals going up against those big corporate players, those big businesses, there's just not the same. It's not a level playing field at all. There's not the legal resources. There's not the money there to be able to sustain. Yeah, 1 million to prosecute. That's huge. And so there's that economic toll, but also, as you said, the emotional toll that we so often see with this form of crime for the victims. Yeah, it is, and it's not something that people, as you said, unless you're directly involved in it, it's not front of mind when we talk about crime. But it is very, very interesting. It's very interesting to read these cases and to try to understand how they happened, but also to try to think about how do we actually detect them, how do we actually address and punish them. And this is where media and power and politics come into it as well in helping to conceal a lot of these forms of crime, and how they can be prevented is very, very difficult. It's a difficult area to investigate. It's a difficult area to prosecute, for sure. All right, we might leave it there because we only have the 6 of you left in the room. Thank you for hanging in to the end. This sort of wraps up the last week of the focus on theories of crime and crime types. Next week, we move to the system. So, or next week we move to victims, sorry, which is very, very interesting. Victimology is an interesting area of study. So, please, if you can, make it along to next week. Please, if you can, work on your assignment. You've got next week and the bit of the week after. So, get cracking on that. I'm here for any questions. And let me know if you need support or if you need an extension or whatever's going on. Just remember, I can help you, but I can only help you if I know that you need help. All right. Thanks to the 6 of you. Thanks to everyone who's watched the video, and I will catch you next week.